Lovely to see you all this evening. Hope you've all had a couple of good days. So, great feedback from some of you about watching Mike's lesson and how useful that was. We can certainly do it again, and as I said before, we have a couple of PDIs who have been very willing to share their lessons. So we will do that. But I think our conclusion from Monday evening was that we would take a look at the 7 deadly sins. So the 7 deadly sins came up in a conversation, and particularly towards the end of the evening, and we thought it would be wise to just pay a bit of attention to these. Now, if you're a member of the video site, which of course you all should be because you're on these Zooms, you should all have access to the part 3 section in the videos. And on there, I think I say that I talk about the deadly sins. I could be completely wrong. Maybe you, Laura, or tell me that I don't.
You can only cover all the competencies.
Yeah,
whereas I said, I'm not. Yeah. There probably is an old live chat.
Possibly. But I certainly cover all the competencies. So I want you guys to know about that for 2 reasons. One, because it may be that I say things tonight I don't necessarily say in the videos, or I say in the videos and don't necessarily say tonight, because of course my brain continues to just churn and more experiences happen every time I sit on my part 3 or I'm training PDI. So I have this kind of constant, inspiration of things to tell you and useful stuff to hand over. New experiences, absolutely. So I hope that both the Zooms and the videos go hand in hand.
The competency videos also have examples, don't they? Yeah, so you've got the guys on there exampling, which can be a useful thing to watch. I know a lot of you guys are joined to do the live chats, but don't forget the other stuff you get within the membership as well. Yeah, utilise that stuff.
Yeah. Second reason I'm going to remind you about the website is that it could be that there are things that you hear this evening that you just need to refresh your memory on, that you just want some more detail about, and that's your go-to place. So as Blaine said, all the competencies are there with examples of real lessons as well. And of course the ADI1. So this is a little note for you. You need to make a note of this. If you're not familiar with the DVSA ADI1, exactly as it says, DVSA ADI1, that is your go-to Bible, because the ADI1 is the examiner's guidelines to driving instructor tests. So you can Google this, and if you put it into your search engine, you will come up with the document, the publication, if you like, which is available to all of us, which is the examiner's guidelines to the part 2, the part 3, the standards check and audit. Laura has jumped on and given me all the threat of the link there as well. She's very efficient.
Might keep her.
Yeah, we'll keep her for a bit longer. And the ADI1, if you're not familiar with the ADI1 is such a simple, easy to read document. Once you find the section that you want, so you're looking for your part 3 section, where it lays out for the examiners the 17 competencies. Bear with us. The 17 competencies in the correct order, giving a description of what each competency is, what the examiners should be looking for, and at the end of each competency, by 1 or 2 competencies, I think, there is a list of proof of competence, if you like. So in other words, it's saying to the examiner, if you see the PDI do this, 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 and this, it's probably a 3. So it's laid out beautifully like that. And then underneath that, it says, if you see the PDI doing this, 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 or this, it's not a 3 anymore. So it couldn't be simpler in terms of setting out a structure for you guys to really understand exactly what is being discussed and talked about.
Before you get into it, you should do answer Brian's question.
That is a very good point. I was just thinking that as you disappeared off. We had a question from a member of this of the Zooms and the work and the website that came to us this afternoon, and I'm just going to answer that question for all of you, because we kind of deflected the question a little bit because we knew it was going to be really relevant to all of you. The question was that not just the person who's messaged in, but all of you are probably having mixed messages. You're probably watching other people's Zooms. I'm really pleased that you are. There's plenty of people out there who are putting Zooms on left, right, and centre. You're possibly communicating with your trainers still if you've not been abandoned, with a little bit of luck. You're certainly getting your information and your knowledge and your advice from numerous different sources, and there's nothing wrong with that. But of of course, the question was, who do we trust? Because if we're hearing somebody give us some advice that contradicts completely what Blaine and I might be saying, here you are stuck in this middle of this minefield of negotiating your journey through your training, not knowing which one it is that you're going to believe, or the advice you're going to take, or the way you're going to structure a lesson, all that kind of stuff. This was specifically about the fact that the person who messaged us in said that they had listened to a Zoom fairly recently in which the audit trainers on the Zoom had suggested that in that day before, or the few days before your part 3, you go off and you practice with your pupil the route and exactly what you're going to do. So you go off and you do this and you rehearse it so it's completely fresh in your mind. And this was suggested as a good tool, something you should all be doing, so that you are absolutely ready to go on your opening night, if you like. So you can do a bit of a dress rehearsal and then you're ready to put on your show. And quite rightly, the person who messaged us said, I kind of get the feeling that maybe you and Blaine don't follow that philosophy. And what I'm going to say to all of you guys, because it will probably link to the 7 deadly sins, is that there isn't any right or wrong. So what you choose to do has to be right for you. But when it comes to listening to the people that you're choosing to get your information and advice from, or your training from even, you've got to go with the people who speak your language. You've got to go with the people who you just think, that makes sense for me. So if you're listening to a trainer who's saying, go out and practice your route, know what it is that you're going to be talking about, where you're going to be talking about it, know where it is that you're going to be stopping, the conversations you're going to have if you are going to stop, have your pupil familiar with what it is that they're going to do. If that is what you feel is going to work for you, go with it. It's because it's got to work with you. It's not my standards, so it's not my part 3, it's not Blaine's part 3, it's your part 3. However, with anything that you do, you need to be aware of the pitfalls about it. So if you do choose to do a dress rehearsal in which you're rehearsing your route, you're rehearsing your script, if you like, you know what it is that you're going to say and do. I even can tell you that there are trainers out there and PDIs who will get their pupils to fault fake. So in other words, a little bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. When we get to this bend, I want you to do it in 3rd gear. Ha, 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 you know, that kind of stuff, so that they are mimicking it, and it's going to be faults that are just familiar and everybody knows that they're going to happen. So they are faked, yeah, manufacturer's faults. The thing that you have to be really, really aware of is that all the planning in the world will not mean that you can replicate it exactly an hour later, a day later, a week later. Things are going to happen. And one of the boxes, of which we'll look at when we're looking at the part 3, is to be able to adapt to that. Now, that's not the same as not preparing. Absolutely, you're going to prepare. Absolutely, when I'm with my PDIs, in the lesson before their part 3, in the hour before their part 3, in the week before their part 3, whenever it is that we're having training sessions, I'm absolutely with the PDI and the pupil they're going to take, because that is part of the preparation, is for both parties to feel what it feels like to have someone in the back. We're absolutely looking at the route. We're looking at the area, should I say, not the route, but the area. We're looking at the ability to know that if this happens, you're going to go around here and you're going to do that. And if that happens, you're going to go around and do that. And if your pupil doesn't get it, then we can link round and try it again. If they do get it, how about upping the ante and going this way? Do you know, and it's all part of a conversation that just allows the thought processes to happen and be linked into the competencies of the structure of the lesson. I'm not saying at the first roundabout, take the 2nd exit left, and at the next roundabout, take the 3rd exit right, and at the following roundabout, do 2nd exit left again, and then pull over in this little lay-by and have a little conversation about how they've gone. I'm not saying that, because if the first roundabout's gone pear-shaped, you're not doing 3rd exit left at the next one. If the pupil's stalled coming out of the test centre car park, you're not doing the first roundabout. It is as simple as that, and we'll look at that compared to the 17 competencies. But to give you an example of my last standards check that I did, I was taking up a brand new pupil. She's never driven before. In fact, I met her 20 minutes before my standards check. So I absolutely knew the area I needed to take her to. I knew it had to be an area where I could do some moving off and stopping and probably had 1 or 2 junctions. So I absolutely went out of my way to find the area. I don't teach a first lesson in Southampton, which is where my local test centre is. I teach my first lesson in my little village where I'm picking up my pupils. I don't drive 45 minutes to do moving up and stopping on the long road that's near the test centre. So, but it was my choice to take this pupil. It was appropriate for me to take this pupil. So I had to find an area. So of course I'm going to go out and find an area. And I did a little recce probably a few days before, because I had 2 potential areas I just wanted to suss out, to know that they were going to be right for a bit of moving off and stopping, and left and come back again. So I worked it out, chose the best of the 2 of them, thought, yeah, absolutely nailed it. Didn't do any more, certainly didn't practice with anybody. Drove my pupil the 3 minutes to the area, swapped seats, and lo and behold, it's bin day. Now, I didn't know it was bin day, and it was just chock-a-block with a recycling lorry and the bin lorry that were going up and down and reversing, and here I am trying to do a little bit of moving off and stopping. I couldn't have predicted that. I went and had a look at the road on the Tuesday, and my standards check was a Thursday. The point being is that it shouldn't matter, that actually your ability as an instructor to be thinking, oh, look, it's bin day. How can I make this work for myself? That's what you can't practice. The fact that the postman comes along, the fact that there's some kids on their bikes, you can't fake that kind of stuff. You can't fake the cat that's going to run out in front of you. However many times you rehearse the lesson, something is going to happen that shows your skills off, of which you have to be in the moment for. And of course, the biggest problem with rehearsing something is then you miss those points, because in your brain you're thinking, oh God, that's just happened. You know, that boy on a bike just overtook us as we were about to turn right. But I haven't got time to talk about that because I would normally be talking about this, or I'm going to be turning immediately left after that. And I've got time to have that conversation, and I'm not planning on pulling over for another 7 minutes. And so what happens is you become blinkered.
And that's mostly subconscious as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your brain just wants to follow the system, the script, if you like. And then someone blows the script off, you just ignore that and carry on going. Yeah. The examiner doesn't ignore it.
So yes, you could get very, very good at scripting something. And the examiners will tell you that they know a scripted lesson, they can see a scripted lesson. It's so obvious a scripted lesson or a rehearsed lesson. Does it fail you? No, it only fails you if you fall into the traps that we've just talked about. But if you don't fall into the traps, or nothing horrendously marked happens, and you get away with the rehearsed lesson, will it fail you for rehearsing it? No, because the examiner's philosophy is quite rightly that they are going to mark you on what they see. So if they see you ticking the boxes, if you like, completing those competencies, whether it's faked or not, you're demonstrating that you're completing the competencies. So they're not going to mark you down for that. The other point, and I think this is a point worth knowing, is that if you have learned something well enough to fake it that well, you've learnt it.
You can do it.
You can do it. Because if you know that you should be asking questions at this time, if you know that you should be asking your people to reflect at this point, if you know that you should be stepping in and giving some verbal or physical instruction at that point, if you know that you're going to analyse and rectify a problem, then you know the principle behind it, therefore you know it. So therefore, whether it was faked or not, you know it. So I get that. I do get that. So as I said, the problem will happen if you are so blinkered and scripted and rehearsed that you're not in the moment. So let's link that to the 7 deadly sins. So let's recap the 7 deadly sins. So the 7 deadly sins, just to refresh your memory, is the 7 competencies that the DVSA tell us that driving instructors consistently score lower on. So not necessarily fail, although of course if you're failing you've probably got these deadly sins wrong as well, but even driving instructors who perhaps are scoring a 48 or a 49 have probably lost their 2 or 3 marks on deadly sins as well. So generally losing marks on the deadly sins. Now this data, these facts that the DVSA have produced, in fact they've produced them a couple of times and the data remains the same, are based on standards checks. So they are driving instructors who are scoring these points on standards check. They're not PDIs on a part 3. They haven't released the statistics or the data, if you like, for PDIs on a part 3. So I'm not able to sit here and tell you that these are the deadly sins for PDIs, not officially anyway. However, I can tell you that my anecdotal, that will do, experience, first-hand experience, if you like, of what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and what I'm watching and what I'm seeing when you guys hand these forms to me, is there is no reason to believe that you're not having the same problems. Okay, you're absolutely falling into the same traps as the driving instructors. However, I'm going to add 2 other things for you. So we're going to go through the 7 deadly sins, but I'm also going to give you what I'm going to affectionately call the terrible 2. Okay, so or the double trouble, if you like, the terrible 2 or the double trouble, because there's 2 more competencies that are going to catch you out. So I'm going to go through the 7 deadly sins. So make a little note of them as I just go through them now. So you've got a little list of them. The first deadly sin is, was the lesson plan adapted when appropriate to help the pupil work towards their learning goals? No, hang on a minute. I've got that. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Okay. So, was the lesson plan adapted when appropriate to help the pupil work towards their learning goals? So that is number 4 on your lesson planning box. The next one is, did the trainer ensure the pupil fully understood how the responsibility for risk would be shared? So that's the first one in your risk management. So did the trainer ensure that the pupil fully understood how responsibility for risk would be shared? And the last one in your risk management box, was sufficient feedback given to help the pupil understand any potential safety critical incidents? So was sufficient feedback given to help the pupil understand any potentially safety critical incidents? The next 2 on your teaching and learning strategies are, was the teaching style suited to the pupil's learning style and current ability? And was the pupil encouraged to analyse problems and take responsibility for their learning? So there's the first 2 on your teaching and learning strategies. Then a couple more further down, you've got, was the pupil given appropriate and timely feedback during the session? So that's your next deadly sin. So that's, was the pupil given appropriate and timely feedback during the session? And then the last one in your teaching and learning strategies is, at the end of the session, was the pupil encouraged to reflect on their own performance? Okay, so that's your 7. Your double trouble, so the 2 other ones I'm going to throw in there that are the ones that I want you to be aware are PDI specific. So this is not something that the ADIs are falling down on, but it's absolutely what you guys are falling down on, is in your risk management, was the trainer aware of the surroundings and the pupil's actions? So was the trainer aware of the surroundings and the pupil's actions? And your third one down in the teaching and learning strategies, were opportunities and examples used to clarify learning outcomes? And they are absolutely specific to you guys. So the 7 deadly sins are there, but the next 2 are really specific to you guys. So what should I do? Should I start with the double trouble? Should I start with the 7 deadly sins? What should I do? Should I do the ones that are more specific to PDIs? Okay, I'm going to do the double trouble ones to start with. So just to remind you, double trouble 1 is, was the trainer aware of the surroundings and the pupil's actions, and were opportunities and examples used to clarify learning outcomes? So what I'm going to do is take the first one. I'm going to find the ADI one, so I'm going to read out to you on the ADI one exactly what this competency says, so that you can hear it from the examiner's point of view, so what the examiner is being trained to be listening for. And then I'll make it into instructor language for you. I'll tell you why it's a problem, the traps that people fall into, and we'll look at some solutions. So, got my wrong thingy. Can you have that piece of paper? Thank you. So in your risk management box, we have Sorry, I should be organised. Why? Why am I missing a page that I need? Bear with it. Talk amongst yourselves a second. What directions and instructions given? Right, I've got it. Bear with me. Okay. So, was the trainer aware of the surroundings and the pupil's actions? This question lies at the heart of the PDI's professional skill. They should be able to take in the outside world, observe the actions of the pupils, including comments and body language, judge whether those actions are suitable in any given situation, and respond accordingly. Any serious lapse in this area is likely to lead to a 0 marking. And that's it. Okay? That's it. It's one of the competencies, one of the few competencies where they don't give indications of competence or lack of competence. So it's short and sweet. However, isn't it interesting that it says that this is the heart of the professional skill? So this is absolutely fundamental to what you should be doing. So looking at what they're saying that you need to be able to do is take in the outside world, observe the actions of the pupil, including comments and body language, judge whether those actions are suitable in the given situation and respond accordingly. So let's elaborate on this and let's look at why you guys struggle with this. Another way of looking at this competency is basically, were you aware of what was going on inside and outside of the car? So were you aware of what was on inside and the outside of the car? If you want to break it down further, it is as simple as fault identification. So in terms of your pupil's actions, that's about fault identification. So we're going to look at this in two ways. We're going to look at the outside of the car. So were you aware of what was going on around you? Were you aware of what other road users were up to and therefore anticipating what other people were potentially going to do, or what your pupil was going to have to do because of the outside world? So were you aware that you were looking far enough ahead to give your directions and instructions when there was a parked car and your pupil has got to go around a parked car and there's a meeting situation? So were you aware of this impending situation that was going to happen, and were you responding accordingly? Were you aware as you were sitting at the traffic lights of the cyclist that was sitting on the left-hand side of you? Okay. Were you aware of the motorbike that was overtaking the cars on that national speed limit road? Were you aware of the ambulance that was coming up behind you? Those kind of things. So were you generally aware of what was going on around you and responding accordingly with your verbal or physical instructions? In terms of were you aware of what was going on inside the car? That is your fault identification. So were you aware that the people missed their right mirror check as they went round the bin lorry? Were you aware that the people did a signal before a mirror, so was getting their MSPSL the wrong way around? Were you aware that the car was in third gear rather than first gear as you moved off from the roundabout? So that's fault identification. Now, one of the reasons why you guys struggle, and therefore it is in my terrible two, if you like, my double trouble, is that this, of course, comes with experience. Absolutely something that driving instructors who have a certain number of years of experience don't fall into the trap of doing. Because just like anything, the more and more experience you gain, the more and more you clock up your situations, your scenarios, the outcomes of what you've done. So you're building this memory bank, if you like, of things that have happened or didn't happen as you were teaching. And that is what your instinct is then based on. So that little instructor instinct, that little alarm bell, that little bit of, oh, what's he going to do? Or, oh, what's my pupil going to do? Or, oh, I bet they're going to miss this. Or, I suspect they're going to stall. You know that because it's happened to you before. So you've built up this memory bank, if you like. That's what your instinct is based on. Now, the reason why drive instructors don't fall down on this standards check is that after you've been doing it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, not much passes you by. So I've been an instructor now for 13-ish years. I cannot remember the last time people put that car into first gear instead of third gear as we're traveling along at 38 miles an hour. Okay, can't remember the last time that I did not just know that they had pushed that gear stick into first gear, and before their foot comes off the clutch, boom, I am down on mine. No way does their clutch come up at the point where they've rammed that gear into first gear. Okay, just doesn't happen because I'm aware of it. In the first year, constantly, I don't know whether you guys have been in the car with the people who's rammed it into first gear when they should have been third, and we do that horrendous emergency braking and we all get a whiplash. It happens a lot in those first few weeks, days of being an instructor, even months of being an instructor. It happens 2 or 3 times of that experience into you, and you will now be aware of tuning into the gear just not looking right, the way the hand works, the way you get some kind of vibe that it's just being forced and it shouldn't be forced. Something will kick in because it's happened to you too many times and you're on it. So it is pure experience that allows these things to be built up. Now you can train the experience. So some of these things that we've been telling you guys to go off and do with your people that you're living with and your essential journeys, this is your fault identification. This is watching what they're doing, looking at, tuning into the sound of things, tuning into the peripheral vision that you're getting as somebody's doing something with a gear stick, tuning into the noise that the car is making. All those things you can absolutely accelerate your learning, but there is nothing as valuable as experience. The traps that driving instructors often fall down to is that, as we've said before, the longer and longer you go teaching for, the longer and longer you get into a structure of perhaps ignoring a fault or letting a fault go, knowing you're going to pick up on it maybe in a couple of hours' time or a couple of lessons' time. So, for example, I gave the example of not picking a pupil up on a blind spot when we've left the side of the road, knowing that sometime in the next 40 hours, we're probably going to cover blind spots. I absolutely would be picking it up on a part 3 or standards check. The problem more experienced driving instructors have is that they let a fault go because they know they're going to cover it at some point. The problem you guys have is not spotting it in the first place. That is the difference. Okay. Charlie, you're unmuted. Can I help you?
Oh, sorry, my mistake.
Sorry. So this is about your fault identification, and this is absolutely crucial that you're doing this. Now you will see from the other deadly sins how if you are not spotting faults or you're not aware of what is going on around you to be able to respond accordingly, how it's going to affect the other competencies. Because if you're not spotting faults, how on earth are you possibly going to identify the pupil's needs? If you haven't identified the pupil's needs, how on earth are you going to restructure your lesson and change the focus of your teaching in response to their needs? So you can see that this one competency of getting that wrong will have this cascade of issues. And if you have watched any of my fail focuses on a Sunday evening when I produce a fail focus, where we look at somebody's form and we look at particularly the points that they've scored ones on, and we look at how they link, you'll hear me saying that. How one thing falls down, it's like a pack of cards. Okay. So this is an absolute crux of competency, and as it says in the ADI 1, it is the pinnacle, if you like. It's the foundation stone of so many other things. Let's take the second one that is specific to you guys. So were opportunity examples used to clarify learning outcomes? This is the third one down on your teaching learning strategies. I'm going to read it out to you and then explain it as well. So were opportunity examples used to clarify learning outcomes? While training in technique is core to the learning process, it is important to reinforce this input and link it to theory. The best way to do this is to use real-world situations during the lesson. The use of practical examples and scenarios on a lesson gives the pupil a better understanding of when, how, and why to use a particular technique. This can be done, for example, by asking the pupil to think about why mirrors are important when changing direction, for example. Then it's going to give you the indications of competency. So here we have indications that all the competencies are in place could include using examples identified on the lesson in a suitable way and at a suitable time to confirm or reinforce understanding. Exploring different ways to use examples to respond to difference in preferred learning styles. Using examples that are within the pupil's range of experience and ability to understand, and recognizing that some pupils will be able to respond instantly while others will want to think about the issue. Indications of lack of competence, so in other words, don't do any of these. Using examples that people cannot really understand through lack of experience. Using complex examples that the pupil doesn't have the ability to respond to. Failing to give the pupil time to think through the issues and come up with their own conclusion, or imposing an interpretation. Okay, let me make it a little bit more PDI friendly for you. Your lesson, your part 3, is like a blank canvas. So at the start of your lesson, you have this lovely blank canvas, and on the blank canvas, things are going to be painted. So you're going to paint stuff, your pupil's going to paint stuff, other people are going to paint stuff, the weather's going to paint stuff, the road is going to paint stuff. Just stuff is going to appear into this masterpiece that is in front of you. Here you have this ability to use what is on your canvas. So if an opportunity arises in front of you that you can use to demonstrate something, to quantify something, to give an example of something, then this is about using that opportunity. So, for example, the person ahead of you is turning left, and you're also going to turn left. And so you've asked your pupil to turn left, and your pupil does the middle, and they've put a signal on, and the person in front obviously has put a signal on, and the person in front positions themselves beautifully as if they're turning left. There's an opportunity to be saying to your pupil, what's the guy in front done well? Well, he's positioned left. Look at his car. What's the advantages to him in the position he's chosen? Particularly if you're 3 or 4 cars back and you're sitting there thinking, what am I going to talk about as I'm coming up to this junction? Look at the guy in front. How's he positioned left? What's the advantages to him? Go do that. Put your car where he's put his car for me. Okay, so you've used an example to clarify a learning outcome. And there you can see that if you were doing MSPSL at junctions, how powerful that is, because you've got to the position bit and you can be having that discussion because you've used somebody else's example, not just your own example, somebody else's example. If you didn't have someone else's example, of course you want to use your own example. Pop yourself on the left, stop the car. If there's nobody around, you're not holding anybody up and you're talking about position for MSBSL, there's no reason why you can't stop the car and say, right, let's have a look at this position. Give me a couple of positives about why we positioned this way to turn left. Are there any disadvantages about how we positioned ourselves? So you are using what you're doing to explore it further. You're taking learning further and deeper. Now, the other thing that the ADI1 says is about, but doesn't make particularly clear, but this is what they're saying, is about not only using opportunity examples that are given to you, but going deeper with your questions. And this is something that driving instructors, PDIs, don't do. They don't go deep enough with their questions for true learning to really take place. This is what I mean by going deeper with our detail, because the devil's in the detail. If you were to sum up this competency in one word, it would be detail. We're very good, or most of us are pretty good, at the first 1 or 2 levels of questioning. So, for example, what mirrors are you going to check, Fred, as you go around the parked car? Oh, I'm going to check my middle mirror and my right mirror, Louise. Yes, well done. That's level 1. And actually, record yourself. You'd be surprised how often you stop at level 1. That was a level 1 question. What mirrors are you going to check? My middle and my right. Done. The second level of question is, what are you looking for, Fred? Okay, so checking your middle mirror and my right mirror. What are you looking for? And the answer is somebody overtaking me or a motorbike, Louise. Yes, well done. And more often than not, people will stop there. So level 1 and level 2 tends to be pretty common. We get that kind of stuff. And the chances are you get that kind of stuff because that's probably the kind of stuff that was drummed into you on a part 2. So what mirrors are you going to check? I'll check the middle and right. What are you looking for? We're looking for motorbikes or anyone overtaking. And that's as basic as it gets. Your next level is, what are you going to do about it? Because this is where the learning starts taking place. If you miss the level 3 out, what's the point in even asking a level 1 or a level 2? Because if you're going to check a mirror and you're going to see a motorbike, if you don't actually know what it is you're going to do about it, what's the point in checking? You haven't got a solution to what it is that you're going to see. So this is really important that the learning starts taking place from this level. What are you going to do about it if there was somebody overtaking you? Okay, well, probably going to slow down and let them go, Louise. Now, I often do this in my workshops, so some of you might be familiar with this, where I then throw it open to the workshop of drive instructors and say, what's your next question then? So what's your level 4 question? Now, I'm not going to ask you to unmute yourselves, but have a little think about what the next question would be. And actually, people often struggle with this because level 1, 2, and possibly 3 are the most common ones. But I would suggest that your next level of question has to potentially be something about consequences. So I know we've talked about consequences before, but what would the consequences be if we didn't check our mirrors? What problems might happen if we didn't check our mirrors? So this is where you're going to get to the consequences, because again, you can see that to answer the consequence question, we're learning. This is where the learning now takes place. And as the ADI 1 said, this is about the theory as well. So we're not going to go off and run over a cyclist deliberately to prove the point about why we need to look in our middle and the right mirror, but there has to be some theory behind what it is that we are doing. And this is where the learning is taking place. So if you're doing mirrors, if you're talking about mirrors, if you're learning about mirrors, if you're doing MSPSL and you've not gone into these levels, you're not exploiting learning, and therefore this is this competency. And then I'll say to the group, so what's your next level of question? So those are the 4, give me the 5th level. And quite often people struggle with the 5th level. Now, some of you, I hope most of you, will be familiar with what I say when I talk about the 5 skills, the high 5 that we teach. The high 5 skills that we teach are the only skills that we teach as driving instructors. So it doesn't matter what we teach, whether we're teaching roundabouts, whether we're teaching pedestrian crossings, rural roads, country lanes, town driving, it doesn't matter what it is that we teach. There are only 5 skills that we teach as a driving instructor. The 5 skills we teach are awareness. So have a go at writing this down. Awareness, of which I want you to write open brackets, observations, close brackets, because observations are awareness. Awareness is observations. Anticipation. Planning. Car control. And judgment. And when I say judgment, I want you to put open brackets, decision making, close brackets. Laura's put it in the box for you. So awareness, anticipation, planning, judgment, and car control. That's it. Yes, we talk about self-evaluation, and maybe self-evaluation would be a good live chat for us to do actually about how we reinforce self-evaluation. Self-evaluation is the umbrella skill that goes under, that covers all of those high 5. Yeah, absolutely. There's no improving your awareness, planning, anticipation, car control, and judgment without self-evaluation. So it goes through the whole lot of them. But if you think about roundabouts, what skills are you teaching? Awareness, planning, anticipation, car control, and judgment. If you think about maneuvers, what skills are you teaching? Awareness, planning, anticipation, car control, and judgment. And as I very often say in my workshops, I ask people to give me a pupil, think about the pupil they last took to test and who failed. So what did that pupil fail for? And let's go for example. The pupil fails for a meeting situation. So in other words, the pupil causes the car coming towards them to have to stop for them. So they failed, got a serious fault for a meeting situation. It goes down in the little box as meeting situation. What let them down was the skill, not meeting situations, was the skill. So what let a pupil down in that situation was, so I've got, sorry, the dog is decided to join me on the live chat, which has completely thrown me off. It's taken blame seat. So what's let that pupil down is awareness let the pupil down, or observations of what was going on, anticipation of the other car coming, the planning of what they needed to do about it, the car control to slow the car down and let the other guy come past, and the judgment. So perhaps the whole judging of whether they had the time to go, whether they had space for two, whether how far away that guy was. It was judgment that let them down. So it will be a skill that's let them down, not a lack of knowledge necessarily, but a skill. Okay. So we should be teaching skills, not subjects. You can use a subject as a carrier subject. So we could be doing meeting situations of which the skill we're going to be practicing is awareness, planning, anticipation, car control, and judgment. So if we go back and look at the questions that we're asking and the levels of questions, if I said to you with your high five in front of you, level 1 question is, what mirrors are you going to check? What have we covered off there from a skill point of view? I would hope that you guys would recognize that we've covered off awareness or observations. What mirrors are you going to check? I'm going to check my middle and my right. Yeah, so that's your observations. So we've covered that. What are you looking for? Oh, I'm looking for motorbikes or anyone overtaking me. We've covered anticipation. Anticipation is what other people are doing. We've covered anticipation. What are you going to do if you saw somebody coming? Well, I'm going to slow down and let them go. So that's planning and car control. Slow down and let the motorbike go past me. So how are you going to slow the car down? Oh, I'm going to take all the power out, drop it down to first gear, Louise, and perhaps creep as the guy goes past me. Great, so we've got some anticipation, some planning, and some car control. You can throw in your consequence question as well, which covers your self-evaluation of why you're doing all of that. So your self-evaluation is covered as to the importance of why you're doing it. But if you stop at that level, the one skill that we have not covered is judgment. And I have to say that if you go and listen to the questions that you ask in your car, you will cover awareness. In fact, I'd probably say that 90% of the questions that you ask will be about awareness, because we harp on and on and on about observations. Probably cover some anticipation, probably cover some planning. In fact, I'd say probably you do planning more than you do anticipation. So have a little think about that when you listen to your questions. But the one thing that will fall off the bottom of your priority list again and again and again is judgment. So let's take the situation that we were saying about what mirrors you're going to check, what you're looking for, what you're going to do about it. How can we ask a judgment question? The judgment question is, so when you look in your middle mirror and your right mirror and you see the motorbike, have you got a way of knowing whether he's catching you up or not? So have you got a way of knowing whether you can go around the parked car? Because otherwise what your people are saying is they're saying, well, I check my middle mirror, my right mirror, and I see the motorbike who's only half a mile away. Well, we've got time to go around the parked car then, haven't we? So how do we make the judgment about whether we're going to do what it is that we're going to do, or we're going to have to make a different decision? That comes down to judgment. And if you listen to the questions that you ask, you'll find that you guys, in fact, everybody in general, but you guys don't go deep enough with the, what factors are you going to take into account when you make a decision about what it is that you're going to do? That's your ultimate judgment question, because that covers everything. What factors are you going to take into account when you make a decision to go at the roundabout? What factors are you taking into account when you make a decision to stop or go when the light turns amber? What factors are you taking into account when you make a decision to go to pull out in front or behind the red car? What factors are you taking as the small child walks towards the pavement? Okay, so it's the factors which allow you to be able to make a judgment, because every situation is going to be different. So the factors need answering all the time. It's a continuous desire to need to be answering judgment questions. And to bring it back to this competency, that is where learning takes place. If you're not doing level 3, level 4, and level 5 of questions, learning is not taking place. It's superficial stuff. What mirrors are you going to check? What are you checking for? What mirrors are you going to check? What are you checking for? It's superficial. So this is what they're meaning about taking a learning opportunity. So let's say you're going to be doing MSPSL or mirrors and really exploiting the subject. That's that box. Now I can tell you from experience that if you have scored a 1, possibly a 0, but a 1 on the first 2 competencies, which in teaching and learning strategies, which is was the teaching style suited to the pupil's learning style and current ability, and was the pupil encouraged to analyse problems and take responsibility for their learning, I can almost guarantee that the number that goes in that third box for this opportunities and examples competency will mirror the 2 above them. Okay, so it's very, very common for that to happen. Laura, there's some things going on in the text box and stuff. Do you want to?
Yeah, there's quite a few questions actually, which I don't think we're going to have time to answer today. So that might be worth doing next time maybe. But Stephen's just asked, does each of the high 5 skills involve the next level of knowledge, understanding and ability?
Hang on a second, I'm just going to stop you for a moment because Blaine is just taking some screenshots for our data and it's pinging away in my ears, and so I've missed your words. Say again, so sorry.
So does each of the high 5 skills involve the next level, knowledge, understanding and ability?
Does each high 5 skill involve the next level, knowledge, understanding and ability? I don't know whether I understand the question. Does each high 5 skill involve the next?
Stephen, if you want to unmute and explain. I know Stephen normally can unmute and talk.
Yeah, Stephen, can you just?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Lou. I'm just wondering if on each of the high 5 skills, awareness, etc., could you break down each of those? Do they understand it? Do they have the knowledge, the understanding, the ability to carry that forward? Is that could that be classed as a learning opportunity?
I think that you could do, and of course this is something that you're certainly not going to do in 45 minutes. It's something that you're going to do over 45 hours, not 45 minutes. But I like your theory behind the fact that each of the competency you want to check they have the knowledge and understanding and ability of that particular skill, if you like. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice way of looking at it. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Next, Laura.
There's no more questions at the moment related to this. So.
Okay, I'm going to open up the mics then. So if there's anybody who's got a question about anything that I have just said, or those 2 particular competencies. So I know we're going to talk about the 7 deadly sins, but I'm kind of taking the 2 that are really specific to you guys. So open your mics up if you'd like to just ask a question about anything that you've heard. Diana.
I've tried using your judgment question a few times. I haven't articulated it as well as you do. But sometimes I get no. So I'll say, have you got a way of knowing when not to move the car? And they go, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't really know. No, but I do, but I can't articulate it as well. And I sort of struggle then to go further when they need that explanation on how I would judge it.
That's a really nice point, Diana. So one of the reasons that drive instructors don't ask judgment questions is because it doesn't occur to you to ask a judgment question. You haven't noted it as it being an important thing that we should be doing. Second reason drive instructors don't ask judgment questions is because they haven't got an answer when a pupil says no. Because if I said to you guys, how do you judge when to go at a roundabout? How do you guys judge when to move into the right-hand lane to overtake the lorry on the dual carriageway compared to the white car that's screeching up behind you? How do you know there was a gap that you could move out to overtake the lorry? How do you guys know whether it is okay to go through the amber light or you're going to stop at the amber light? You know because you have experience. And of course, what do our young people lack? Experience. So of course they don't have a way. What kills our young people? Judgment and lack of experience. They get their judgment wrong. They get their decision making wrong. And this is why it's so important that we are trying to find ways. Now, one of the things that you need to do yourselves is to go off and absolutely mimic this. Put yourselves into situations when you're out, next time you're off driving to your essential journey, you'll be making 1 trillion judgment calls as you're driving. I want you to absolutely put yourself in that pupil seat and be asking yourself, how did I know it was okay? How did I know it was okay? What factors was I taking into account when I made the decision to move off from the side of my road when I left to go to Tesco? Right down to that. What factors was I taking into account? And you're going to ask yourself the question again and again and again, because every time you do move away from the side of your house, the situation will be slightly different. So, for example, on one day you move away from the side of the house, it's going to be, well, the factors I took into account was, well, I had a really good look around. There was nobody who was going to be affected by me. 10 minutes later, it might be, well, I had a good look around and there was a car that just turned into my road, but based on his speed and the type of vehicle he was, and the fact that actually I know he's my neighbour and he's going to pull up behind me, I made the decision. Can you see that this is experience of how do we know, how do we know, how do we know? And there's just 1 trillion ways that we know. And so one of the things that we need to do, Dan, is we need to be prepared to put our pupils then in the situation where we're not necessarily telling, we've got the answers ourselves, because if you do have a pupil who doesn't have the ability to do that, we need to have something to give them as a lifeline. But more importantly, we need to get them to find their own judgment. So, for example, if I was sitting at the side of the road and I was doing something as simple as judgment when moving off from the side of the road, I would be sitting there and I'd be saying, I don't want you to go. I want you to imagine that you're going to move off at some point. Middle mirror, right mirror check, occasional blind spot. Watch the cars coming down the road and tell me when you would go or not. Or I'd go now, or I wouldn't go now. Why wouldn't you go now? Well, because he's going a bit faster, he's got too close. So when would you go? I'd go now. Okay, so that actually they're practicing the decision-making bit. That's where judgment comes in, is their ability to be practicing that. It's things like giving opportunities when it comes to things like overtaking a cyclist, for example. And actually, to be brutally honest, you'd be lucky if within a 40-hour period of lessons, you get an opportunity to overtake any more than 1 or 2, maybe 5 cyclists at the most in a 40-hour period of lessons. So in terms of their skill of overtaking a cyclist, for example, the chances of them actually doing it with no help from you, because the chances are that 3 or 4 times that we do come across it, we've done some kind of prompts and things, we've taken responsibility for the judgment of it. They don't build up the judgment. So give me a couple of factors you're taking into account before you make a decision to so you can do it at the time as well. So particularly in a moving environment. So looking far enough ahead, give me a couple of factors you're going to take into account before you pass this parked car. That's judgment and decision making. Okay. So 2 ways of doing it. One is to be doing it in situ, where you're getting them to experiment and weigh up their own judgment in different scenarios. 2 is to be doing it with questions on the move when the situation is arising, and you're asking questions in a controlling way. And I think that, obviously we need to talk about questions in more detail, but if you get your questions right, you'll find that your questions not only will control, but will push judgment. Okay? So give me 2 reasons why you're not going to overtake the cyclist. Can you hear that? I am controlling because we're not overtaking the cyclist. But at the same time, I've given them decision-making questions that are taking into account the factors. So this is increasing their ability to make a judgment. And I would do that a lot with people. So, for example, to get to the end of the road and to stop at the end of the road and handbrake neutral because there's nobody behind us and just watch the cars coming. Okay, tell me when you would go. Tell me when you wouldn't go. Tell me when you would go. Tell me when you wouldn't go. Why wouldn't you go now? What was it about that made you say, oh, no, I wouldn't go now? And then we're going to put it into practice, because like with all these things, it's really important to put it into practice. And one of the things that I make a point of saying to you guys is how important it is that you follow up judgment when a pupil gets it right and when a pupil gets it wrong. But it's really important that you're following it up in the moment, here and now, right this second. So let me give you an example of a pupil who perhaps is turning left out of a junction. So we're merging left from a minor road onto a major road. And I know that you guys will that have had some teaching experience will know this. The pupil doesn't quite get their judgment right. It's not enough for you to dual control them, but it's enough for you to know that the white van that was coming down the road is going to have to come off his gas. Okay, he's going to have to anticipate us and give us a little bit of leeway. And what happens is your pupil turns left, and they take them forever to get into second gear and to get themselves going. And you check your middle mirror and you watch that white van come right up behind you, tell you off, and then back off a little bit. And then you'll say to your pupil, so what made you think that you had a gap there? Well, some other question that you might come up with. Your pupil will say, oh, well, I thought I had time. And you'll say, so did you see what the white van did? Nope. Because they don't. Opportunity missed. So it's all very well you say, well, he came right up behind us going like that. Okay. Pupils missed it. They've missed an opportunity to reflect on their judgment. So one of the most important things you're going to do is when a pupil turns left in that situation, the first thing you're going to say is quick glance in your middle mirror for me. So they catch it. They see the situation. Then we can get ourselves going. Then when the situation is appropriate, we can say, what did you notice? And they'll say, or they might even not need a question. Most of them will say, ooh, I think I pulled out in front of him, but they've seen it. Therefore, they're able to now reflect on the decision they made and put it into the box of that didn't work. Okay. It's then just as important. I don't think instructors do this, where you turn left, you say, quick glance in the middle mirror for me. Did you make him slow down? Nope. Great decision. Nice judgment. How did you make that judgment? Because that was right. That worked. Let's go do it again and get it right again. So it's important that we're doing both so that they are building up their experience. Because as we've said, our judgment comes from experience. What don't they have experience? Let's go give them experience. That is how we're going to build up their judgment. Okay, but it has to be quantified with this ability to evaluate the judgment, self-evaluate the judgment. Remember what we said about self-evaluation is the skill that rolls all the way through these competencies. So that ability to self-evaluate that we've got something right is probably more fundamental to your judgment / decision making than any of the other high five.
Just a quick one there. Stephen said, would I be correct in saying sort of doing more than one mirror check, sort of knowing that they're getting closer, then checking that mirror again, sort of if you're waiting to sort of move off?
I didn't quite hear that. Was it getting them to do more than one mirror check or getting us to do more than one mirror check?
I'm not sure, but presumably about asking the pupil to do more than one mirror check to sort of see how close they're getting in that sort of right mirror when waiting to move off.
I think so. It needs to be little glances in mirrors, of course. So it depends on the situation, but you're basically asking the pupil to do what it is that they need to do to be able to see the effect or not that they had on somebody else. So whatever is necessary for them to see that effect. That's what you're wanting to do. Anything else that has come up?
Not so much related to this, but there has been at least 4 or 5 questions that aren't related to this, so I'm not sure what you want to do about those questions.
Well, I'm going to carry this on because I'm very aware that we haven't necessarily looked at the 7 deadly sins. We've looked at the 2 that the double trouble ones, which is very specific to the PDIs. So if we carry this on Monday and we look at the 7 deadly sins, Laura, shall we just stay on and have a quick look, and you can just go through with me what we've got, and we can bring those into Monday's chat as well. And we will look at the 7 deadly sins. But I guess there's a bit of homework for you all. Go off and make sure that you know what the 7 deadly sins are. Go off and read it in the ADI 1, okay, so that you have done that groundwork of knowing exactly what we're covered. And the chances are what we'll probably do is end up covering 3 on Monday, 3 or 4 on Wednesday. And then what we'll do is we'll do some homework on next Wednesday evening of watching the lesson, of which you guys can look at the deadly sins. And then we can come back on the Monday and evaluate somebody else's lesson based on deadly sins. Okay. Does that sound like a plan? Some vague nodding going on. Okay. Okay. Fab. Thank you. Lovely to see you all. Have a good few days. We're back on Monday, having done your homework on your deadly sins, and we'll go from there. Hope it has been useful. See you later.
Bye. Bye. I'm here.